Hello everyone and good evening. My name's Don Arleth and coming to you live from Warsaw. You're watching World News Tonight. If everything works out well, we'll have a trilateral meeting. That's what U.S. President Donald Trump said as he welcomed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy back to the Oval Office to discuss the prospects for peace. Donald Trump has also said that a ceasefire is no longer necessary to end the war. We'll have more on this in just a moment, but first, the latest headlines. Russian oil deliveries to Hungary halted after Ukrainian strike. Weapons for Ukraine is big business in Slovakia. And Serbia's president vows a crackdown on anti-corruption protesters.
Hi, Ursula.
Good to see you again.
I said that you just warned me.
Russia continues to attack civilians, attacking Kharkiv, killing many.
Is there a just offer for peace on the table?
Just moments ago, there was a press conference in the Oval Office with both President Trump and President Zelenskyy talking to reporters. Here's just some of what was said.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to have the President of Ukraine with us. We've had a lot of good discussions, a lot of good talks, and I think progress is being made, very, very substantial progress in many ways. We had a good meeting, as you know, just a short while ago with the President of Russia, and I think there's a possibility that something could come out of it, and today's meeting is very important. We have, I guess, the seven very powerful leaders from Europe, and we're going to be meeting with them right after this meeting, and thank you very much for being here.
We live under each day attacks. You know that today have been a lot of attacks and a lot of wounded people, and the child was dead, small one year and a half. So we need to stop this war, to stop Russia, and we need support, American and European partners. And we will do our best for this. And I think we show that we are strong people, and we supported the idea of the United States, of personally of President Trump, to stop this war, to make a diplomatic way of finishing this war. And we are ready for trilateral, as President said. This is a good signal about trilateral. I think this is very good. Thank you.
And now let's go live to Kyiv, where our correspondent Alex Cardier is standing by for us following this crucial meeting at the White House. Good evening now, Alex. President Zelenskyy, what exactly is he hoping to achieve there in Washington? I mean, we've seen this press conference very different than what we saw just a few months back.
Yeah, Don, you're absolutely right. A much warmer atmosphere in that Oval Office as we saw President Trump, President Zelenskyy, even their very first interaction was warmer. The Ukrainian leader quipping, joking, saying that he had worn the best jacket he had. The U.S. president saying, I love it. Now, there was certainly a warmer feeling in the Oval Office as well. President Zelenskyy joking with that reporter who had criticized him for not wearing a suit in the past. So much more lightness, much more warmth in that Oval Office. But that's only part of the picture, Don. We have to also listen to the words the U.S. president said just in the last few minutes. He was talking about, first of all, the fact that he was initially attracted to the idea of an immediate ceasefire, but then he said that doesn't work because it may be a strategic disadvantage for one side or the other. Now, behind the warmth of the interaction between the two leaders, that will be a problem. The ceasefire is something President Zelenskyy has been pushing for weeks. So too has his European allies. We've seen the U.S. president also talking about the European leaders, calling them very powerful friends of his, but that he wants to stop the war in Ukraine. Also saying the U.S. is, of course, not donating any more weapons to Ukraine, but allowing European powers to purchase them for the Ukrainian armed forces. So actually, behind the warmth on paper, not a lot of budging from the U.S. president. Having said that, We heard him say just in the last few moments that the US will give Ukraine very good protection, very good security. That, of course, is to do with those security guarantees that the European leaders and President Zelenskyy are so eager to get more clarity on from the US president, which means if a peace deal is agreed, what will the US do to ensure Russia does not invade again, as so many Ukrainians are sure it will. Now, there's also the question of US support. What does that US support actually look like? How important is that US military support to Ukraine? Well, earlier today I spoke to the head of Ukraine's defense procurement agency, who oversees all of the purchases of weapons, all of the incoming air defense, and I asked him how important US support was for Ukraine. Let's have a listen.
The cost for our country, for our people, will certainly rise if the Americans stop their support. And the bad news is that the cost will probably be incurred by the civilians, because when we are talking about air defense, first and foremost, we are talking about, defending peaceful cities in inner Ukraine, so to say. And it will be, of course, a big tragedy if we will not be able to defend ourselves from the air.
Well, as you said, Don, certainly it was a warmer environment in the Oval Office. It couldn't have been much worse than the bust-up back in February, but that reminder from Arsen Zhumadilov, the head of the Defense Procurement Agency of Ukraine, about the stakes for Ukrainians every single day. Just today, 7 people killed in the second largest city in Ukraine, in Kharkiv, including a toddler, an 18-month-old, 18 injured in that city as well, 3 killed in Zaporizhia with dozens more injured. Beyond the diplomacy, beyond the body language analysis, beyond the jokes in the Oval Office, there is a real cost for Ukraine. That is what is on the line in this meeting between President Zelenskyy and the US President Donald Trump. Don?
Absolutely, absolutely. Alex Cartier reporting for us from Kiev. Thank you. U.S. President Donald Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, said that there was progress on NATO-style Article 5-like security guarantees for Ukraine. There were also discussions over land swaps involving 5 Ukrainian regions. While details of these 2 critical points remain undisclosed, reports suggest that the Kremlin is pushing for full control of the Donbas. Yeremy Holodnyuk explains in this next report.
Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff said Russia had made concessions on territorial exchanges with Ukraine. The announcement sparked concerns that Trump might be striking deals behind Kyiv's back, but Witkoff firmly denies that was the case.
He understands that it is for the Ukrainians to decide how they might land swap, how they might make a deal with the Russians on different territories there. But that's why Zelenskyy and the Europeans are coming to the White House on Monday to make those decisions themselves.
Some reports suggest that Putin is demanding that Ukraine hand over its remaining territory that it controls in the Donbas in exchange for Russia retreating from Ukraine's northern Sumy and Kharkiv regions, a prospect not exactly evoking enthusiasm in the war-torn country.
Ukraine will never recognize occupied territories to be Russian. Russia is not going to leave these territories. So the only thing we can hope now on, and we can achieve, and we will be there in any way, the question is when. Tomorrow, in 1 month, or in 1 year. But we're speaking about freezing of the conflict.
Handing over the Donbas would mean Kyiv giving up on places like Bakhmut, where thousands of Ukrainian soldiers have died trying to protect it, and cities like Krematorsk and Slovyansk, as well as a fortified line protecting Ukrainian territory to the north and west.
Ukrainians, they know that they can build a great defense positions on Donbas and don't move the war to the rest of the country. And I think this is the biggest problem in Ukraine with exchanging any territories, that no one is trusting Putin.
The Donbas is also a strategically important region for Ukraine due to its rich natural resources, which have historically fueled the country's heavy industry and energy production. This industrial infrastructure, including metallurgy and manufacturing, has played a key role in Ukraine's economy.
It's the first of its kind in a historic move. Youras Ziankovich, a former Belarusian political prisoner, has launched a groundbreaking legal campaign in New York, becoming the first to sue the Lukashenko regime in the United States federal and state courts, leveraging American laws that allow accountability for torture and repression by foreign officials. Ziankovich's case marks an unprecedented step in the fight for justice. No other former political prisoner has pursued such legal action in the United States until now. Alex Zulinski has more.
Lawyer and activist Youras Ziankovich is on a mission. He held a press conference at Warsaw's Belarusian house, during which he launched his legal campaign aimed at holding Belarus and its secret services internationally accountable for repression and torture. He himself spent more than 4 years in a Belarusian prison after being arrested in Moscow and sentenced to 13 years in prison in Belarus on politically motivated charges.
I was lucky because I had American documents, I had American degree, American profession, I had a great family in the United States. They waited for me, but not everybody has this opportunity. Many people, they just being kicked out from the country. They found themselves in a foreign country without no knowledge of language, no profession, no money, and they need money to start.
The freezing of Belarusian assets in the U.S., Ziankovich says, could be a way that those imprisoned by the regime could then seek compensation for the damages suffered. Upon his release in April 2025, Ziankovich had lost 50 kilograms and had endured torture in prison.
24 hours per day being in one cell, and it was a horrible experience, of course. Also, I have been tortured with electroshocks in prison, in Mazur prison.
In Belarus, if someone speaks against the government, shares opinions that are different, or talks badly about the leader, Alexander Lukashenko, they can be put in jail. According to the Vyasna Human Rights Center, there are almost 1,300 political prisoners held in Belarus today. On Friday, President Donald Trump took to social media where he commented on his recent call with the Belarusian leader, in which the topics included further releases of all remaining political prisoners.
I had a wonderful talk with the highly respected president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko. The purpose of the call was to thank him for the release of 16 prisoners. We are also discussing the release of 1,300 additional prisoners.
While the road ahead remains challenging, the efforts to release those who still remain in Belarus prisons ignite hope that they too will one day come home. Alex Zulinski, TVP World.
Hungary's oil lifeline from Russia has been cut off, sparking alarm in Budapest and fresh tensions with Kyiv. A Ukrainian strike on a key transformer station halted crude flows through the Druzhba pipeline, Hungary's primary source of Russian oil. While Moscow scrambles to repair the damage, Ukraine accuses Hungary of stubbornly clinging to Kremlin energy despite repeated warnings to diversify amid the ongoing war in Ukraine. Natalia Komarov digs deeper into the dispute.
Russian crude oil stopped flowing to Hungary and Slovakia on Monday morning after Ukrainian drones struck a pumping station of the Druzhba pipeline. Hungarian Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó reacted with harsh words and even threats.
Ukraine has once again attacked the oil pipeline leading to Hungary, cutting off supplies. This latest strike against our energy security is outrageous and unacceptable. A reminder to Ukrainian decision-makers, electricity from Hungary plays a vital role in powering your country.
Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha responded by recommending that Budapest direct its complaints to the aggressor.
Peter, it is Russia, not Ukraine, who began this war and refuses to end it. Hungary has been told for years that Moscow is an unreliable partner. Despite this, Hungary has made every effort to maintain its reliance on Russia. Even after the full-scale war began, you can now send your complaints and threats to your friends in Moscow.
Ukrainian forces have been attacking Russia's gas and oil infrastructure for many months now, aiming to cut off the Kremlin's main source of income. Meanwhile, Hungary and Slovakia remain the only two European states which continue to import fossil fuels from Russia.
In the last few years, sanctions have galvanized Russia. So sanctions enabled functioning of an alternative system of payments, alternative system of logistics, which in fact has benefited third parties. So all keeps flowing.
The rest of Europe managed to find alternatives. For example, Azerbaijan, a country which used to belong to the Soviet Union and is now more than willing to sever its ties with Moscow. Also, on Monday morning, Russian forces hit a state-owned Azerbaijani oil depot in Ukraine's Odessa region. It was the second time in 2 weeks. Foreign Minister Sybiha believes neither time was an accident.
Moscow does this on purpose, acting against Azerbaijan's interests.
After the previous attack, Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev signed an order to transfer $2 million to the Ukrainian Ministry of Energy. The two countries also began working on a natural gas deal on top of crude oil.
In the past, we used to say that Azerbaijan used to balance between US and Russia, but in the last 15 years, I would say, Azerbaijan has effectively started a new geopolitical game.
As long as Russian fuels are available, there will be buyers. However, as Hungary has experienced, access to these goods is more and more limited due to Ukrainian drones and international sanctions. For TVP World, Natalia Komarov.
Now to unrest in Serbia for 6 nights straight. Cities across the country have been gripped by anti-government protests that have spiraled into violent confrontations. What began as peaceful demonstrations has erupted into street battles. Masked pro-government agitators wielding batons and fireworks clashed with protesters, while riot police fired tear gas and stun grenades to regain control. Pavel Trzaskowski reports.
Acts of rage and violence interspersed with pensive moments. Such were the streets of many cities in Serbia over the weekend. The protests, which started peacefully last November after the concrete canopy of a railway station in Novi Sad collapsed, tragically killing 16 people, continue and have recently taken an increasingly violent turn. These protests against state capture and corruption have become a major challenge for the country's president, Aleksandar Vučić.
He's clearly under pressure. The government is at a loss on how to actually respond.
And Vučić's most recent response is an increased crackdown on the protesters.
I want to tell you that you will see our surprising decisions in the next 3 or 4 days. You will witness very decisive action. In the next 3 or 4 days, it may seem in some places that the state has retreated, that we have been defeated, that we do not exist. It will seem like we have been defeated, but at one point, you will see the full determination of the Serbian state.
And with growing police brutality, Serbia might face backlash from the European Union, which it hopes to join. A warning was to be conveyed to Vučić during his recent meeting with Austrian Chancellor Christian Stocker.
There was a leak, I think, from Austrian sources that the Austrian Chancellor came to warn President Vučić not to use violence of any greater sort than he is using and arresting people if he wishes to remain in the status of candidate for the EU.
Despite his recent hardline language, Vučić has also made some concessions to the protesters. Earlier this month, he floated the idea of organizing early elections, something that the protesters have been demanding for a long time. And as the end of his second presidential term is slowly nearing, he is openly talking about his political retirement.
Probably he's not working any longer for himself, but he's working as a team with all of his collaborators.
These actions would prepare the ground for the elections in which the ruling Serbian Progressive Party, led by Vučić, will have to face the opposition that is currently forming on the Serbian streets. Pavel Trzaskowski for TVP World.
The meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is underway. At stake, the future of Ukraine. This could be one of the most consequential meetings since the full-scale invasion in 2022. Now, joining me to discuss the potential for a breakthrough is Ukrainian Ambassador to Poland, Vasyl Bodnar.
Good evening.
Hello, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you very much for joining us on World News tonight. Great to have you. Now, it looks like...
Nice to hear you.
Yes. Now, we just saw this press conference in the Oval Office, a much better atmosphere that President Zelenskyy, your president, was invited to this time around as compared to last time. But one of the main things that strikes me is that Donald Trump has said there is no ceasefire needed for a peace agreement to stop the war. What are your thoughts on that? Is this a breaking news development for you? Are Ukrainians counting on a ceasefire to negotiate this peace deal?
Look, the Ukrainians will be the most happiest persons in the world if we would have peace tomorrow, and we are ready for that. So, as you might remember, that the Ukrainian side agreed to the proposals of the American side, so to make a ceasefire. It was not our proposal, we just agreed to that, and we have been stuck to that point up until today. So today it will be the discussions, what is the best way to find the way to the peace and how to convince Russians to start talking in a serious way, not just, let's say, sending some third-level persons who have no competences and wouldn't like to achieve peace. So I believe that today talks in Washington, D.C. will be very fruitful and will bring sensible results for Ukraine and for the world.
And based on what we're seeing, the direction that this is taken in recent weeks and months, do you think the United States has a better understanding right now of what is exactly involved and what's at stake in these negotiations?
In comparison with the situation at the beginning of the year, I believe they understand much more better, and today they have the views from the Russian side after the long discussions. We have also a long way of cooperation and communications with the American side during the preparation for this visit. We have also European leaders on our side who will also present their position, which should lead to the some kind of solutions of this conflict and finally war. Because we need security in Europe, and without Americans, it is very hard to achieve it. And we believe that the Trump's administration and Trump himself personally is very dedicated to looking for the peace, and today's talk, we believe, would be also a success for him and for us.
Yes. Now, in terms of diplomacy, you're an ambassador. You're in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. How much of a boost will President Zelenskyy get from having very close European leaders, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, together with him at the White House to have further discussions with the Trump administration?
Look, it's very important voice of solidarity and support in practical terms. I couldn't believe that it could happen, but let's remember, let's recall, did we have something like that in previous times? Is it possible to recall that European president or Ukrainian president could lead a European delegation to talk with the Americans? It is still something new, and we are grateful for all European leaders, including Ursula von der Leyen and all leaders from Europe who joined this mission, because it's really important for all of us, and we believe that this strong support of Ukrainian president will lead to the practical results. It's not only about the peace, but it's also about support of Ukraine. It's also about reconstruction. It's also about the creating more safe and secure area for the world, and not to be misled by Russians who are traditionally trying to spoil every talks. And even today we have severe attacks on Ukraine during the negotiations, and when we know that the talks should be taken in the White House.
Right, and President Trump has been asked about that frequently. Do you think that with Russia's behavior and them acting out the way they are and continuing to attack Ukraine while supposedly engaging in these peace talks, do you think that this will sour the Trump administration's stance towards Vladimir Putin for good reasons?
Yes, it's actually natural behavior in the sense when the Russians understand only the force, only understand the strong position, and only understand when they are beaten back. And honestly saying, Ukraine is the only country today who is beating them in the front line. So that's why they are like terrorists attacking the civilian objects and civilian cities. So mostly we are receiving the signals about the attacks on cities and villages, not about the frontline defeats, because they are defeating the frontline and to Ukrainian armed forces. So today the problem is that the world look at this war as a protected conflict, but it's not a conflict. It's a war which is going on, and a number of civilians have been killed due to the activities of the Russian terrorist state. So we need to get a solidarity position, and also to think how to not to allow Russia to spread this conflict into other countries, because we know that it is not about Ukraine. It is not about the control over these territories of Ukraine by default, but it's all about the creation of the new geopolitical situation in Europe and in the world. And let's turn back to the 2021 when Russians presented their position in the form of ultimatum demanding NATO to withdraw and very different crazy things, which world didn't react. But it means that the Russians will not give up until they are beaten.
Yes, now also major topic for discussion there in Washington are security guarantees for Ukraine. What does Ukraine absolutely have to have at the bare minimum to be even able to consider a peace agreement with Russia? And I mention this because we all remember the Budapest Memorandum and how none of the signatories respected that.
Look, we did not need any papers because the papers we had before, they didn't work. Neither Budapest Memorandum, no Minsk agreements, no any assurances. We need a strong physical support. It means supplies to our armed forces to make them stronger, to modernize up to the necessary level to defend ourselves much more stronger, to create the more effective system of air and missile defense, and also to think about the deployment of the allied forces to Ukraine after the military activities or after the hostilities will be over, just not to repeat the war and not to allow Russia to create a temptation of repeating the war if the ceasefire will be established or peace will be talked about. So our position is very clear, and we are, let's say, delivering our message to the world and to all the European and leadership and President Trump that we couldn't trade our territories. We couldn't do it because the constitution forbid it to any government and any president. But from the other side, we understand that we need to reach some compromise, and we are ready to discuss it with the American side.
Exactly. Well, that was my next question for you. In terms of territory swaps, what are the absolute red lines, would you say, that will not be crossed by the government in Kyiv?
Look, everybody is discussing something which is unrealistic. So we are not swapping territories because we do not possess practically any Russian territories. If we could possess it, then we could exchange for some Ukrainian territories. The issue is how to exchange Ukrainian territories for Ukrainian territories. But one territories are controlled by Russians and other territories are controlled by Ukrainians. So it's like you have a flat that someone take your kitchen and would like to exchange then for your living room. That's absolutely not acceptable. And moreover, we have a real background in the constitution that does not allow anyone except the people of Ukraine to vote for that. The third story is that we should take into consideration the problem of the internal situation in Ukraine, how the public opinion is reacting to that, how the military forces are reacting to that. And I don't think that Ukrainians in majority or armed forces, I mean the soldiers on the front line, will agree to any concessions of the lands, particularly those territories who are highly fortified, and Putin couldn't take over them for the last 11 years. So that is the crucial point for us. But we are ready to have political discussions and to look for the political solutions, not the military solutions on the battlefield, because it leads to nowhere. It's the fourth year of war, only the bloodshed is going on, and Russia's losing people trying to get some new villages practically in last year they occupied, I don't know, maybe 35-40 kilometers of our territories, but they lost hundreds of thousands of people. So if they would like to lose them more, we will be fighting, because we are defending ourselves. We are defending our right to be independent. We are defending our right to decide how we should develop, and we are deciding our destiny. So that is our solution. But as I told, we are ready to cooperate with the American side on looking for the way to the peace.
Okay, Mr. Ambassador, we're almost out of time. I would imagine that your statements on the territorial swaps or the situation also extends to Crimea. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Crimea is Ukrainian territory, and there is no other solutions like turn back to Ukraine in diplomatic or in the military way.
Okay. Ukrainian Ambassador to Poland, Vasyl Bodnar, thank you very much for joining us tonight. And of course, we all are crossing our fingers for the best results in Washington. Thank you, sir. And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great evening, and we'll see you next time. Good night.